October 21st, 2021. A routine elevator ride in a downtown San Diego high-rise. The cameras show a man, 29-year-old TikTok creator Ali Abulaban, press the button for the 35th floor and step inside with a face that, at first glance, looks ordinary. 2 minutes later, another camera on the 35th floor records him running down the hallway toward a door. From the outside, it appears calm. From the inside, everything is about to fracture. Later that afternoon, Ali will call 911, claiming he found his wife dead. He will collect their child from school and speak to reporters with the practiced emotion of someone used to an audience. But the building's cameras, the audio he secretly installed, and the trail on his phone tell a different story. One of jealousy, surveillance, and a plan that transformed obsession into violence. This is not the story of an unexpected tragedy discovered by chance. It is a recorded, deliberate sequence of choices that led a man from live streams and sketches to murder. The footage exists, the witnesses exist, and now the archive opens on a case that unfolded in public and was captured in private, step by step, minute by minute. To understand what happened on that 35th floor, the file goes back several months before the cameras, before the hallway, before the gun. Ali Abulaban wasn't just another resident of the Spire San Diego Tower. Online, he was known as Jin Kid, a creator whose impressions and comedy sketches drew millions of views. But behind the edited videos and smiling thumbnails, the relationship between Ali and his wife, Anna, had fractured almost beyond repair. Friends say the tension at home had been building for years. Arguments, jealousy, accusations that flickered between them like static. By early October, Anna had asked him to leave their apartment. She wanted space, time, and distance. Ali, however, refused to believe the separation was real. That's when he installed a listening app on their daughter's iPad and hid it inside the apartment. From miles away, he could hear everything. Doors opening, voices rising, conversations that weren't meant for him. What began as a way to check in quickly turned into constant surveillance. And as the recordings continued, so did his anger. On October 21st, the secret audio picked up the sound of Anna laughing with a friend in her living room. Witnesses later said Ali believed this confirmed his worst fears, even though nothing on the recording suggested anything more than company. But by then, fear didn't matter. Facts didn't matter. Only jealousy did. And with one decision, he turned the listening device off, picked up a gun, and drove straight to the apartment he was no longer welcome in. He arrived at the Spire San Diego Tower just before 3 p.m., moving with a pace that wasn't frantic but fixed, like someone following steps he'd already rehearsed. The lobby cameras show him entering without hesitation, hood pulled low, hands in his pockets. To anyone watching, he looked like a resident coming home. But in his mind, the recording he'd heard minutes earlier was still echoing, twisting, replaying. The elevator doors closed around him, sealing him in a small metal box with nothing but his thoughts. The timestamp on the footage marks the ride at less than a minute, yet the tension inside that elevator feels suspended, as though the air itself understood what he was carrying. When the doors slid open on the 35th floor, Ali didn't walk. He moved fast, almost running, heading straight for Anna's apartment. He didn't knock. He didn't pause. He used the key he still had, stepped inside, and crossed the threshold without a word. What happened in those next seconds would later be described by investigators as immediate, deliberate, and fueled entirely by the mindset he walked in with. There was no argument, no warning, just the sound of a door opening, followed by the sound of a gun being raised. By the time neighbors heard the commotion and call for help, 2 people were already lying on the floor, and Ali was already walking back out into the hallway, leaving behind a scene that the cameras had not captured, but that his own choices had created in full. He stepped back into the hallway with the same calm he had when he entered the building. The camera captured him closing the door behind him, adjusting his hoodie, and walking away with a steadiness that did not match what had just taken place inside the apartment. There was no panic, no hesitation, no attempt to flee. Instead, it looked almost like the end of an errand. Something finished, something checked off. As he moved back toward the elevator, residents on the floor began opening their doors, drawn out by the echo of shouting and the unmistakable sound of gunfire. Some stepped into the hallway for only a moment before retreating, dialing 911 from behind locked doors. Others stayed hidden, listening as footsteps faded down the carpeted corridor. By the time he reached the lobby, Ali took out his phone. Later records show he didn't call emergency services first. He called a family member. The words he spoke during that call would become part of the prosecution's case, a window into the mindset he carried with him as he left the building. When he finally drove away from the tower, the crime scene he left behind was only just being discovered. Neighbors who entered the apartment found Anna and Ray on the floor, both already beyond saving. Paramedics arrived within minutes, but there was nothing they could do. Inside the elevator, on the footage the investigators would later review frame by frame, Ali kept his head down as the doors closed. The ride down was quiet, the same stillness as the ride up, except now, the silence carried the weight of two lives that had just been taken. After leaving the building, Ali didn't rush into hiding or attempt to disappear. Instead, he drove calmly through downtown San Diego, heading toward his daughter's school. On the way, he finally dialed 911, but not as a witness or a bystander. He told the dispatcher that he had just walked in and found his wife dead, leaving out everything that had happened minutes earlier in that apartment. The call was strange from the start. His voice wavered, but not in a way that sounded shocked. Not in a way that suggested he had stumbled upon a tragedy. It was controlled, almost as if he were performing grief rather than feeling it. He didn't mention the friend who had been killed beside her. He didn't give clear details. He didn't tell the dispatcher that he had been in the apartment at all, only that he had found something terrible. While officers were racing to the building he had already left behind, Ali pulled into the parking lot of his daughter's school. Surveillance footage would later show him walking inside, entering the hallway with a composure that did not match the emergency call he had just made. He waited for dismissal time, blending in with the other parents as though this were just another Thursday. When his daughter finally appeared, backpack slung over one shoulder, she had no idea that her life had changed forever. Ali took her hand, walked her out of the building, and led her toward the car. Moments later, he placed her in the back seat, pulled out of the parking lot, and started driving north. At that very same moment, inside the Spire Tower, officers were sealing off the 35th floor, discovering the two bodies, and confirming that the person who had called 911 was the same person they were now seeking. If you're finding this case compelling, consider subscribing to the archive. It helps us bring more files to light. And if you have thoughts or theories, leave them in the comments below. Every perspective adds to the investigation. As Ali drove north on Interstate 15, he didn't speed. He didn't weave between lanes or try to hide his license plate. The dashboard camera from a nearby vehicle captured him driving normally, hands steady on the wheel, as if he were headed somewhere routine, not fleeing a double homicide. He told his daughter they were going to a better place, a phrase investigators would later highlight for its clarity. It wasn't the language of confusion or shock. It was the language of a man who believed he already understood how the rest of the day would unfold. Meanwhile, back in San Diego, officers had matched the 911 caller to the person seen on the surveillance footage. A bolo, be on the lookout, was issued for his vehicle. Patrol cars were stationed along the northern freeway, scanning every passing car, watching for the make, model, and plate of the SUV Ali was driving. Just after 5 p.m., 2 California Highway Patrol vehicles spotted him near the Los Penasquitos area. They waited for an opening in traffic, then activated their lights. The moment the sirens came on, Ali didn't run. He pulled over to the shoulder, put the car in park, and placed his hands where officers could see them. The arrest was calm, almost eerily so. Officers approached cautiously, weapons drawn. But Ali lowered his window and surrendered without resistance. His daughter sat in the back seat, confused and frightened, watching as her father was taken away in handcuffs. Within minutes, the highway was shut down. Commuters watched from their cars as officers escorted Ali into a waiting patrol SUV. And just like that, the man who had spoken to millions online, who had built his life on characters and impressions, was no longer performing. He was in custody. And back in San Diego, detectives began assembling the timeline that would dismantle every part of the story he had tried to tell. When detectives began piecing together the timeline, the story Ali had offered on the 911 call collapsed almost instantly. The surveillance footage alone placed him in the building at the exact time of the killings. But it was the digital evidence, quiet, invisible, undeniable, that told the clearer story. Inside the apartment, officers found the iPad belonging to Ali's daughter. Hidden behind one of the living room cushions, it was still logged into the listening app he had installed days earlier. The audio log showed hours of recordings, every conversation, every movement, every harmless detail that Ali had monitored obsessively. And on the day of the murders, the final recording captured Anna's voice, followed by laughter, followed by the moment Ali shut the feed off. Detectives also examined his phone. The location data matched every step. His drive to the tower, the minutes inside the building, the time he spent in the hallway, and the route he took afterward. Nothing aligned with the story he had told the dispatcher. Nothing supported the idea that he had stumbled onto a crime scene. Everything showed intent. Witness statements added another layer. Friends told investigators that Anna had been afraid in the days leading up to her death. She had told them about the separation, the tension, the arguments, and her fear that Ali was not accepting the end of their relationship. She had asked him to return his keys. He refused. When the autopsy reports came back, they confirmed what detectives already suspected. There was no struggle, no intrusion, no unknown assailant. The shots were precise, fired at close range, matching the path and distance of someone who walked into the room with a weapon already drawn. Piece by piece, the evidence painted a picture that no defense could soften. Obsession followed by surveillance. Surveillance followed by rage. Rage followed by a deliberate act that ended 2 lives and shattered a third. When the case finally moved into the courtroom, the atmosphere was heavy from the very first day. Rows of spectators filled the benches. Family members, reporters, and strangers who had followed the story from afar. But when Ali Abulaban entered, shackled and silent, all eyes locked onto him. Gone was the confident persona from his online videos. He didn't wave. He didn't smile. He didn't perform. He kept his head down, shoulders tight, as though shrinking into the seat itself. During the early hearings, prosecutors laid out the evidence with the same precision that investigators had built the timeline. Surveillance footage, digital logs, the recordings from the iPad, the 911 call, every piece fit together cleanly, offering a version of events far clearer than the one Ali had attempted to tell. Then came the moment that brought the courtroom to a near standstill. When questioned directly, Ali didn't deny what happened. He admitted to the shootings, though he framed them through anger, jealousy, and heartbreak. Emotions the court acknowledged, but did not excuse. He said he had lost control, but the prosecution countered with the steps he had taken before arriving at the apartment. The drive, the recordings, the hidden listening device, the fact that he brought the gun with him. As the trial continued, witnesses spoke about Anna, her kindness, her attempts to rebuild her life, the fear she'd carried in the final days. Friends of Ray described a man who had simply been in the wrong place at the worst possible moment. 2 lives cut short by a decision made long before the elevator doors ever opened on the 35th floor. Sitting at the defense table, Ali listened to all of it without outward emotion. No nods, no tears, not even the slightest reaction as prosecutors played footage of him sprinting down the hall, or as the court heard the final recording from the iPad. By the time closing arguments began, the outcome was no longer in question. The evidence had spoken louder than his words ever could. And when the jury returned, their verdict reflected that clarity, finding him responsible for both deaths, rejecting every attempt to frame the killings as anything but intentional. In that moment, the man who once built a life on his voice and characters found himself facing a sentence defined entirely by silence. The day of sentencing arrived with a quiet tension that seemed to settle over the entire courtroom. Family members sat shoulder to shoulder, hands clasped, faces drawn. Some held photos, others held each other. When Ali Abulaban was brought in, he didn't look at anyone, not at the judge, not at the families, not at the empty chairs reserved for those who could no longer speak for themselves. Before the sentence was read, the court allowed impact statements, and his relatives stood first. Their voices trembled as they described the woman they lost, a loving mother, a devoted friend, someone who had been trying to rebuild her life with courage and hope. They spoke about her daughter, now left without a mother, carrying a grief too heavy for her years. Ray's family followed, describing a man who walked into Anna's life as a friend and never expected that kindness would cost him everything. Ali listened, but his expression hardly changed. He offered a brief apology, soft, unfocused, a few sentences that drifted into the air without connection or weight. For the families, it was not enough. For the court, it changed nothing. When the judge delivered the sentence, the room held still. Life without the possibility of parole. No early release. No second chance. The court called the murders deliberate and devastating. The outcome of choices made long before the trigger was ever pulled. As deputies moved to escort him away, Ali stood for a moment, looking down at the floor as though searching for a version of himself he could no longer recognize. Then the door closed behind him, and his chapter, ended. But for the families, the story does not conclude with the verdict. It continues in memories and absence, in the difficult work of rebuilding life after unimaginable loss. And so the file is returned to the shelf, its pages marked by grief, warning, and the irreversible cost of a single decision. Whatever the public once knew of the man behind the screen, this record now tells the fuller truth. Quiet, unfiltered, preserved in the archive for whoever seeks to understand how an ordinary day turned into tragedy. If you had been on that train, what's the first thing you think you would have done when the chaos started? Let me know in the comments. And if you'd like to explore more cases from the archive, subscribe and turn on notifications. Your support keeps these stories alive and ensures the next file reaches you the moment it's opened.